Welcome back to my channel, guys. I'm going to be speaking today about how you can get the perfect cake every time, and I mean it. Number one is, don't ever skip your preheating phase. Always preheat your oven. The essence and the reason why you need to preheat your oven is because you want to start off the baking process immediately the cake is in the oven, or immediately your baked cake, whatever it is, muffins, whatever it is, cookies, is in the oven. You want it to start up. You don't want it to be there and then it's aligning with the heat. No, you want it to start baking almost immediately. So that is one thing that you need to do to order to get a perfect cake. Another thing that you need to do to get a very perfect cake is you need to learn to sieve your ingredients. I cannot overemphasize, besides the fact that sieving takes away unwanted visitors in your cake. Of course, you don't want the dirt. Besides that, sieving introduces air into your cake batter, into your flour. So with that, you find yourself having fluffier baked goods, softer baked goods. Do not overmix. I have said this thing so many times. Don't overmix. When you overmix, you activate the gluten from the flour, and when you activate the gluten from the flour, you find yourself having a dense cake. Just fold in the flour. Don't go boom. We are not fighting. Cake is science. Cake you need to pamper it. You need to pamper it. Just need to pamper it. Pamper the eggs, pamper the butter, pamper the sugar. Okay, those are the things that you need to do to be able to get a perfect cake. Another thing that you need to do is that you need to learn to measure your ingredients properly. Learn to measure your ingredients properly. Okay, please don't make a mistake of not measuring them properly. If you're using your cup and it says 2 cups, make sure it's 2 cups. Don't put 3 cups. Don't put 2.5 cups. Don't even put 2 1/4 cups. Put 2 cups. If it calls for measuring a stick of butter, do a stick of butter. Don't do 2 sticks. Okay, what I'm just trying to say is that make sure you measure your equipment properly. Get a good measuring digital scale. Get a good measuring cup and teaspoon or your tablespoons, and you're good to go. One more thing that you need to do to get your perfectly made cakes is do not use cold ingredients. Don't ever use cold ingredients. Make sure that they are room temperature. I mean your butter, I mean your eggs, I mean your sugar, all of it. Because what happens is that when you introduce cold ingredients into your butter, they tend to cuddle. They're not smooth anymore. They tend to cuddle. We don't want that. We want it smooth. We want to mix, and we want to find it so creamy. We want to find it so smoothie. Okay, so that's one thing that you need to do. Another thing is using the wrong oven temperature. That is why most times when I put my recipes, I always like to tell you, bake at this temperature, bake at this temperature. Though I know I forget at times, I'm human, and I find you correcting me and asking me, and of course I reply you anyway. So yes, use the right temperature. If your recipe calls for 175, some cakes like red velvet, you have to pamper them. You don't want to use high temperature, right? You don't want to use that. So there's some cakes that also calls for using high temperature. You don't want to use low. So you need to be able to balance it out. All right, so what I'm going to say now should actually have been in part 1, really, because that's like the beginning of it all. Follow the recipe. There's a reason why the recipe is the way it is. There's certain things that ingredients you can actually play around with. Say you want to change the recipe, there's certain things you can play around with. You can decide to play around with the flavor. You can decide to play around, but there's certain things you cannot play around. You cannot say you want to increase the flour and you don't increase the wet ingredients. You cannot say you want to increase the wet ingredients and you don't increase the dry ingredients. Do you get mine? Like I tell you, baking is science. You don't want people to do this. So follow the recipe as it is, okay, and stick to it, and you find yourself having a good cake. Another thing is using a wrong pan size. The recipe calls for using an 8-inch pan, and you use 10-inch pan. You have widened. I hope you know you have widened it, right? So when you pour the batter in, you find yourself having a very thin layer of cake, and it's looking somehow, it's not looking fluffy, and you're wondering what's going on. The recipe calls to be baked in an 8-inch. In that way, you have the desired height, but you decided to pour it in a wider pan. So don't complain when you find yourself having a different cake, okay?